The major supermarkets could face hefty fines under new rules forcing them to treat their suppliers much more fairly. Our political reporter Tom Lowry joins us now from Parliament House. Tom, good morning. Talk us through these new rules.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. So this is a new mandatory code that'll regulate how these major supermarkets deal with their key suppliers. There's been this concern for quite some time that the Australian supermarket industry is simply so concentrated, it's so dominated, particularly by the duopoly of Coles and Woolworths, that they have enormous power over their key suppliers. They can really make or break them. The federal government tasked the former Labor government minister, Craig Emerson, with looking at this issue, and he's opted, or he recommended, that the government make a pre-existing voluntary code of conduct for supermarkets mandatory, but also toughen it quite significantly. Make the arbitration process between suppliers and supermarkets a little bit more independent in particular, and also impose these hefty new fines for breaches of this code. Fines of up to $10 million or even 10% of a company's turnover over 12 months. That could be a figure well into the billions of dollars. Now, some parties here in Parliament, the Greens and the Nationals in particular, had pushed for even tougher powers, divestiture powers that would have allowed the federal government to intervene and break up these supermarkets if they felt that was required. But both Dr. Emerson and the government decided that was not quite warranted. We don't have a specific timeline for how this is going to be implemented, but the Treasurer Jim Chalmers says it is a priority. Here's a bit of what he had to say earlier.
We do need to change the Competition Act to implement these changes to the Food and Grocery Code. We'll do that when we can. Obviously, we will need the support of the Parliament in order to do that. But as soon as we can, we want to bed down these changes so that we can ensure that the supermarkets are doing the right thing by their growers and their suppliers and by their customers.
Now, Michael, this mandatory code will apply to 4 supermarket chains in particular: Coles, Woolworths, Aldi and the wholesaler Metcash. It could also be expanded to include Costco and Amazon down the track as well. The ABC has reached out to Coles, Woolworths, Aldi and Metcash this morning. We do have a response from Coles to these changes. They say they worked collaboratively with Dr. Emerson in his review. They say they'll consider the final recommendations and the government's response in detail and remain committed to supporting a healthy and sustainable grocery sector.
And Tom, there's separate work underway looking at the prices consumers are paying at the checkout. We're all paying high prices, sadly.
Yeah, so these 2 bits of work are focusing more specifically, I suppose, on those checkout prices. The ACCC is undertaking a review into price gouging at present. That's due to report back in August, but we aren't expecting necessarily recommendations out of that piece of work. It's a more sort of broader and longer term focused piece of work. There's also work being done by choice. Now, we saw the first results of this, I suppose, ongoing review of supermarket prices just last week or so. They're comparing the cost of a basket of groceries at the major supermarkets every quarter or so. The most recent results found, I suppose, pretty good results for Aldi, less so for Coles and Woolworths. That will continue, aiming to highlight the benefits, I suppose, of shopping around for the best deal.
As we all try to do. Tom, thank you so much. Emma's here with the rest of the news.
Thanks, Michael. Well, we're going to developing news out of Russia this morning, where gunmen have carried out deadly attacks on 2 Orthodox churches, a synagogue and a traffic police post. Russian state media is reporting that a priest and 6 police officers have been killed, while 2 of the attackers have been shot dead. We'll bring you more on this story as soon as it comes to hand. The federal opposition won't put a figure on how much energy its proposed nuclear power plants will generate until after the election. Investor groups have been calling for clarity from the coalition on the figure, arguing it is critical for investor certainty. But the opposition has instead promised to establish a new body, if elected, that would investigate the potential of the 7 proposed sites. The Queensland Government is standing by a decision to challenge a native title claim over Great Keppel Island off the state's central coast. The claim, lodged by the Wapabara people, seeks exclusive rights to much of the island, including an airstrip and an abandoned resort. Premier Stephen Miles has announced the government is working to keep Great Keppel Island accessible for all Queenslanders. One of Tasmania's most popular wildlife tourism spots, Maria Island, has been closed for maintenance. The island is expected to reopen on Friday, July the 5th, just in time for the start of Tasmania's winter school holidays. Maria Island lies just off the state's east coast and brings about 60,000 visitors a year.
Emma, thank you. And beauty is in the eye of the leash holder. A tongue-in-cheek foster pup has taken out the title of the world's ugliest dog after a rough second-place finish in the contest 3 times. 8-year-old Pekingese Wild Thang was finally the top dog at this year's Ugly Dog
Must have
contest.
a good personality.
Sure.